Hello and welcome to Coffee Lovers TV. On the show today, I have a Guatemala HueHueTenango from Anchorhead Coffee. Had a lot of fun doing the last Anchorhead Coffee, and they wanted to throw some more coffee at me. So they gave me this Guatemala, and I've been trying it out. It's really tasty. So the region HueHueTenango in Guatemala is at the foot of the mountain range Cuchumatenes. I'm sure I'm butchering pronunciations on the show all the time, but I'll figure that out in time. It's the highest non-volcanic mountain range in Central America. This region is known particularly for excellently grown coffee. So HueHueTenango is a very old region. It's an old city and an old region. There are a lot of people of Mayan ancestry who live there. And you can find some Mayan ruins in the area as well. The name HueHueTenango means place of the ancients. So there's just a couple regional tidbits for you. HueHueTenango has become very well known for its coffee these days. And a note on that coffee, it has some, I guess, interesting descriptions. I've read a lot of descriptions about there's like general descriptions of the coffee that comes from HueHueTenango. And you'll notice that as we go through different regions on this show, I'll always try to describe the sort of general expectation of coffee from these regions. But the thing is that the experience you get in the coffee always comes down to how that particular coffee is grown, processed, exported, imported, roasted, brewed, etc. The sort of general descriptions of this coffee seem pretty broad to me. And I have written down on my notes, mild, subtle, complex, interesting, fruity, light floral, clean. It can go from fruity to chocolate. And that almost sounds to me like a lot of coffees everywhere. It certainly does cover this particular coffee, which I have found to be quite light and mellow, and certainly having some fruity qualities. It's a pretty, I was curious to discover after drinking through it a few times, a pretty simple coffee. It is washed, and there's certainly complexity to it in many respects, but in the end, the experience for me was consistent cup to cup and ended up being quite simple. It's still quite delightful. We'll be getting into that. Let's take a little sniff of the bag. The first impression of this coffee from the bag, from the dry aroma, is, well, first off, it is quite a light coffee. So it's not going to have deep sugary richness like medium or darker coffees can have. There's a light, almost like a light bakedness to it. I was actually struggling with the aroma for a bit, and then as I was grinding the coffee earlier, it suddenly hit me that what I'm smelling, and it's actually, it doesn't come out in the bag, it comes out when I grind the coffee, it's Apple Jacks. What I'm smelling right now is kind of a hint of that, but there's something that really comes out in the aroma when I grind the coffee that just makes me think Apple Jacks. And it's this, like, it has to be this appley, cinnamony sort of aroma kind of dancing with the sort of sweet bakedness, like pastry-like scent. These are all kind of very subtle flowing through there, but it's very consistent for me. And definitely apples play kind of a theme in this one, but not sugary sweet apples, but crisp ones, light crisp ones, maybe like green apples in many ways. Okay, that's enough smelling. Let's get to brewing the coffee, and then we can dive in and enjoy the taste. So one of the things that sometimes makes coffee really hard to explain, and why I sometimes need a few tries through a coffee to really get a grasp of it, is that it can be really subtle and complex and have a lot of different flavors and aromas going on. And it can sometimes shift. one of the flavors that I discovered while drinking this coffee, and not here yet, I still haven't poured, it was, so when I was in Thailand, one of the things I liked about being there is all of the fresh fruit that you can get anywhere. You walk down the street and there's fresh fruit vendors everywhere. And one of the ones that I enjoyed somewhat frequently was guava. Fresh, just sliced guava. And it often got served with things like salt or chili sauce and stuff like that. But it has this like has a tartness to it, and a sweet, like a mellow sweetness. It's hard to describe. I remember thinking it was somewhat like a subdued apple in many respects. That's how my memory is remembering it. But as I was smelling this initially, that popped up. That's why I wanted to bring up the taste, because that kind of smell popped up. And then as I've been going through it, this has changed to, I got raisins for a little bit, and now it's just kind of mellowed out. There's a, it's coming back. Let me pour. There is a rich fruit edge to it, but it mellows out and kind of disappears. This is definitely a delicate coffee. Let's just dive in. I get a bit of a tart edge at the beginning. Good sweetness, mellow. It's got a nice balanced body. There's a smooth richness to it, and the acidity is not. There's not a high level of acidity to this, I don't believe. At least I'm not picking up on that. This has many tea-like qualities in I think the delicate and mellow nature, but it has definite coffee richness to it. Of course, it's a light roast, so we are going to get experiences like that. And there's the apples. I remember smelling Apple Jacks on the ground, and it's hard to explain. The apple flavor I get is not like a tart, bright, juicy apple. In fact, I wouldn't call this coffee juicy. I'd call it almost like dry, kind of like a dry champagne. And then that sort of appliness is more like a mellowed, subtle, like the body of it is mellow and subtle like the flesh of an apple, that just doesn't have it's not the tartness of the apple, it's the mellow sweet smoothness of an apple that's just kind of flowing through the cup. I don't know if my descriptions make sense, but that's what I think of. This is just dominated by mellow fruit sweetness. And now I'm definitely kind of getting that guava. This actually, as it cools, it becomes like really nicely sweet. Not like overpoweringly sugary sweet, but like subtle, but smooth and dominant fruit sweetness. And actually, this particular cup is really sweet. It's wonderful. That's the interesting thing about coffee, is every time you drink a cup, you can find something different. And I don't know if that's because of chemical changes, if it's because every day the coffee kind of, as we talk about the sort of golden couple of weeks right after roasting where coffee's perfect, but after the coffee's roasted, it's giving off gases, and it's constantly changing through time. And that's the primary reason you want to get it close to the roast date. There's a certain period for most coffees where it needs to sort of off gas and adjust. Like if you have it within the first couple of days after roast, and then you wait a couple more days, it'll be completely different. There are some like negative flavors in my experience that can happen right after roast that will disappear if you wait a couple days. And then there's that like kind of golden period, but everything is shifting constantly. And so sometimes I wonder if, like the cup I had yesterday, was that slightly different from this one because of that? Or am I now looking for the things that I saw yesterday, finding them, and then noticing other things alongside them? because this cup is striking me as much sweeter than before. And I really like that guava, that view of guava. Like I think I really do taste guava in this. Of course, I could be making myself see that. Very interesting. One thing I noticed yesterday, because I let a cup cool pretty well yesterday and tried it out, I noticed a particular flavor, and I'm curious to see if I can find that again. So I actually want to wait around here and come back after this has cooled a little bit more, and then see if I can find this particular experience. If I don't find it, I'll still share with you what I had before and what I have now. But I just want to wait a little bit and let this cool, and I'll be right back for that. All right, we're back, and we've cooled a little bit. It's still warm. It's not totally cooled off, but I don't think it needs to be. This particular flavor and aroma I discovered was not from a cold coffee. So the problem is I'm now looking for it, which means I might still see it anyways. No, I'm not getting it at all. It may require a cold cup, but that's okay. What I saw was like this combination of ginger and wasabi. And I don't know if that's because I had, not that same day, but the day before, I had sushi. And it's quite possible that was sort of on my mind. I want to talk about the flavors actually that they have on here, as I've kind of mentioned this before. And they list hibiscus, green grape, and chocolate. And I thought this would also be a good time to say that sometimes when I'm tasting a coffee on here, the things that I describe won't match up with what they describe. And that certainly doesn't make what the coffee roaster describes as wrong. In fact, many people would argue that I'm wrong because I'm not agreeing with them. But here's the thing about taste. It's so very personal and subjective. And, you know, it's based off of my past experiences. So when I'm tasting this, and I'm tasting guava, it's almost certainly because the memory of me eating fresh guava while walking down the streets in Thailand is like so strong for me. And, you know, I can look back in memory and taste that when something similar like that comes along in a coffee, it's going to pull that memory before anything else. And that's just kind of how it works. You know, they list hibiscus, green grape, and chocolate. I can't tell you the last time I had hibiscus or ate green grapes. So, I mean, I can conjure up what those taste like, but they're not as strong, like taste or emotional wise in my memory as the guava is. So, but let's take a look through this. And this is interesting, actually, now that I'm looking at this. As it cools off, that tartness is really becoming more clear. But there's actually, on the edges of my tongue, I really taste like a medium milk chocolate. All right, let me put this in terms of cocoa, because I've explored the darker chocolates a little bit. But I'd say like a 50% cocoa bar, probably because of that tartness, because of that little sort of like cocoa sort of tartness, kind of riding on the edges. I think this coffee is probably not roasted dark enough to really pull out chocolate, but that's just my assumption. The green grape, I mentioned in the beginning that had this kind of like dry sort of champagne-like quality. And I'm actually starting to think about like a Riesling. So maybe there's kind of like white, because Riesling is made with white grapes. And let me just say, and I think I've said this before, I'm not very knowledgeable on wines. I've just, you know, I've had a few. That's what pops into my mind, I think. I could be completely wrong about that. I think the tartness of the guava might be pretty similar to like the tartness of a green grape, and that might be what's going on there. And the hibiscus, you know, this is a very tea-like coffee in many respects, so I can definitely see those things going on. But for me, it just comes back to that guava. That's what I'm remembering. So this has been a fun coffee, a very good light coffee. If you're interested in exploring some light coffees, I think that the tartness of this, the brightness, sort of bright fruit edge, especially as it cools, I haven't tried this, but I want to say it may not go very well with milk. I should probably try that out before saying that. But I haven't decided yet if I'm going to include those sorts of tastes on these episodes. That's an interesting decision I need to make. Do I make all of the coffees on here just straight and with nothing added? To me, that's like the purest way to explore taste and sort of show you that process and give you an interesting picture into coffees. Because, of course, the milk can interfere with that. The milk can also bring out interesting experiences. And of course, I think the wider experience with coffee is with something like milk. So that's something I need to consider. But for now, check out Anchorhead. I'll link this coffee in the video description. If it sounded interesting to you, grab a bag and have a brew. It's delicious.